When Mabel Thorne threatens my newly built fortress of freedom, I rally the neighborhood to stand against her iron grip war has begun. It's 7 o'clock on a sweltering Saturday morning, and the golden sun streams down, casting a hyper-real glow on my freshly painted fence. Each brushstroke echoes the surge of resolve that had built over the past few years, whispering sweet promises of independence from the relentless grip of the Homeowners Association. My heart races as I step back, admiring the bold red and white barriers that now stand firm, a sentinel against the stifling expectations of my neighbors. The aroma of fresh paint lingers in the air, mingling with the distant sounds of lawnmowers and chirping birds. It feels like freedom wrapped in glossy paint. But bliss is short-lived. The saunter of afternoon footsteps disrupts my blissful reverie. I turn, and there she is, Mabel Thorne, striding over, with the confidence of a queen surveying her realm. Her appearance could melt steel, hawkish features framed by cropped hair and a scowl that seems to curdle whatever happiness lingers in the air. Her eyes narrow as they land on my fence, and my pulse quickens, stealing my nerves. This is the enforcement, the embodiment of every clash I've had with the HOA, the invader of my newly claimed territory. "That fence is too high, Alex," she barks, her voice piercing through the morning quiet like an alarm clock setting off pandemonium. I feel a pang of rage flare inside me, igniting a fire in my stomach that mixes with the tear of indignation. It's not just wood and nails she's critiquing, it's the very essence of my determination to reclaim my space, reclaim my life. No amount of barking from her can strip away the walls I've built, both literal and metaphorical. My jaw clenches, and I straightened my posture, ready to stand my ground. "It's well within the regulations, Mabel," I retort defiantly, tone sharper than the morning sun reflecting off my fence. Every word is laced with the weight of my frustration, a culmination of years spent bowing to her whims, the never-ending battles over paint colors, fence heights, and acceptable lawn ornaments. I can see it in her eyes. She thinks she can clip my wings and return me to the realm of compliance. Not today. Her lips purse into a thin line, the kind that suggests a perpetual state of disappointment. "It doesn't matter what you think, Alex. The rules are set for a reason, to maintain the uniformity and aesthetic of the neighborhood." Her clipped words bounce around me like a swarm of hornets, each buzz a reminder of her authoritarian stance. I can't help but feel a rush of defiance. Uniformity, they say, but to me, it's just a fancy word for swallowing your individuality like a bitter pill. "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm not interested in mold conformity, Mabel." I shoot back, unable to smother the fire that has now ignited my entire being. "This is my property, my home. I've bent over backwards to comply with your demands for too long." I can feel the flush of anger creeping up to my cheeks as a weak breeze hints at the oppression cracking over my spirit. My hands ball into fists, palms pressed against my thighs while I try to ground myself. 10 days, she continues, unfazed by my outburst, eyes dark and resolute. The threat hangs in the air, unfurling like a dark cloud. "You have 10 days to lower the height of your fence or face fines, Alex." Each word drips with a smug satisfaction, as if she relishes my discomfort, feeding on the suffocation I've fought so hard to escape. This is her power asserting control in the most petty ways. But that evening, as the sun sinks low and turns the sky into a canvas of fiery oranges and purples, a plan begins to take shape in my mind. A wall of a different kind of statement against her tyranny. I can already imagine it solidifying around my home, a fortress built not to keep the world out but to shield me from the overreach of the HOA. In that moment, inspiration and defiance merge, creating visions of a castle wall, painted with colors vivid and strong, a battle cry that sings of independence. As twilight descends, I stand on my porch, surveying the land I've fought so hard to reclaim. I can feel the fresh coat of paint on the fence, the physical representation of my defiance. It's not just a fence anymore. It's a testament to every struggle I've endured, a declaration that I refuse to go back to compliance and complacency. Mabel may have her 10-day ultimatum, but I have something even more potent: resilience and creativity. And I'll build the castle wall of my dreams with the vigor of someone carving out their own kingdom. The days drag into weeks, each one bleeding into the next like watercolor mixed too long. Morning spills into afternoon, and afternoon blossoms into evening. Yet there I stand, suffocating in this quagmire of tension, the sun glaring down as if it can shame me into submission. Mabel's relentless complaints escalate with each dawn. It's a sickening spectacle, so predictable, like the clockwork of a twisted machine, clinking of keys on my door, the rustle of paper, the unfolding of a new threat. Each notice is plastered like a mockery on my doorframe, warning me of impending fines if I don't bend to her unreasonable demands. My heart races, and I rip down the notices, crumpling them in my hand as I retreat back into the safety of my home. Whispers filter down the length of our street, hushed and insidious, a chorus of judgment carried on the wind. I hear my neighbors murmuring behind their well-guarded doors, surrounded by manicured lawns and gleaming vehicles, clutching their cups of coffee and glancing at me with a mix of pity and wariness. It feels like being circled by wolves, and the tension tightens around my throat as if I'm caught in a noose, slowly being drawn tighter with every passing day. They watch, and in their gaze lies the realization that they could very well be next, the next target of Mabel's overreach. After a week spent stewing in frustration, a tiny ember of determination flares inside me. I refuse to be the submissive victim she envisions. It's time to gather the troops. I reach out to a small group of like-minded neighbors who have also suffered under Mabel's oppressive rule. It feels both thrilling and horrifying to connect over our shared grievances, each of us bearing the scars of HOA battles hard-fought and lost. We gather at Tessa's living room that fateful Friday night, the air thick with anticipation and the mingled scent of popcorn and anxiety. The flickering light dances over our faces as tension and resentment bubble to the surface, and we lift our heads, recognizing the strength in our collective hurt. Determined not to be mere victims any longer, we chalk out a plan for a neighborhood meeting, a gathering where we can confront Mabel and her iron grip on our community. The prospect unfurls a sense of urgency in my chest, firing me up. How could I have let her rule over me for so long? How could I have allowed the facade of her authority to keep me quiet? As scattered thoughts whirl through my mind, I feel my resolve solidify. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about reclaiming our homes, our individuality, and our right to live free of her suffocating demands. The clock ticks down toward our scheduled showdown, each second stretching out like an elastic band ready to snap. I prepare myself mentally for the confrontation ahead, not just for my own fence, but for every other neighbor who's felt the sting of her rulings. I practice my words, imagining Mabel's narrow eyes scanning the room, flaring up with that bitter fire she carries. I picture her sneering down at me, ready to belittle my newfound confidence, but I refuse to let fear tether me down. This meeting could change everything. On the night we gather, the air is electric with an unspoken promise. Everyone arrives, some faces familiar, and some broad smiles from those I've met briefly during backyard conversations. As I look around, I see lives intertwined under shared grievances, a tapestry of people who have struggled against Mabel's tight fist. We form a circle in the middle of the community's Santera United Front, ready to take a stand against the woman who seems to thrive on extracting compliance from our spirits. My heart thrums loudly against my ribcage as I step forward, ready to speak. Mabel's rules are smothering our individuality. They strip us of our uniqueness. Our homes should reflect who we are. My voice rings out, invigorated by the nods of agreement from the others. The energy in the room shifts, excitement weaving through the air, igniting a fire that flickers in the eyes of my neighbors. With every word spoken, I visualize our community reviving, a phoenix rising from the ashes of conformity. Together we can challenge her. Together we can bring the fight back into our lives. The murmurs of agreement swell into a chorus, and as I finish presenting my case, I glance at Mabel's face, twisted into a grimace. Even here, stripped of her usual power, she leans forward, dark eyes glinting with calculated malice. "You think that a little meeting changes anything?" She sneers, her voice cold enough to send a shiver down my spine. "You'll realize the foolishness of this rebellion soon enough." Yet those words do not invoke fear. Instead, they ignite a deeper resolve within me. Mabel may have been formidable until now, but this weight of united resistance is something she never anticipated. In that moment, clarity strikes. We are equipped not just with the will to stand against Mabel, but armed with the knowledge and strength of our shared plight. Whatever her plans, we will not shy away from our truth. As I glance at my neighbors, I know they sense it too. This will not end here. The battle is only just beginning, and I am ready to fight. The tide has turned. As we huddle together, a palpable excitement surges within our makeshift alliance. We may not yet know where this path will lead us, but with every determined glance, we fuel one another's resolve. It's not just about the height of my fence anymore. It's about echoing the resistance in our hearts, challenging the quiet fear we've allowed to permeate our lives, and reclaiming our community from the shadowy grip of Mabel and her oppressive HOA. The humid Wednesday night hangs heavy in the air, thick with the tension of unresolved conflict and the scent of sweat-slicked anxiety swirling among us. Each face in the dimly lit community center reflects a shared understanding of the battle at hand, our fates intertwined by the merciless grip of the homeowners association. The old ceiling fan struggles overhead, its tortured squeaks adding an uncomfortable rhythm to the pounding of my heart. I take a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, trying to gather courage as I stand before the crowd, ready to defend my beloved fence. Mabel's rules are smothering our individuality. My voice rises, fueled by passion and defiance. I glance toward the scowling figure at the other end of the room. Her dark eyes pierce me like daggers. Encouraged by my neighbor's nods and low murmurs of support, I feel a swell of empowerment coursing through me. Our home should reflect who we are. The words resonate like a battle cry, uniting those who have long felt subdued by her iron fist. That intoxicating sense of solidarity washes over me, rekindling hope that perhaps we can reclaim control over our lives. I challenge Mabel directly, emboldened by the moment, declaring, "I will go as high as I want, higher if necessary." The applause erupts, and I bask in the warmth of camaraderie, crackling energy of rebellion, dressing each person in invisible armor. She's not just my nemesis. Her hunger for compliance has created a festering resentment among us all. I am not alone in my fight. But then, I turn to look at Mabel, and she leans forward, her smirk cutting through the waves of encouragement like a razor. Surprise flashes in the room as whispers ripple through the crowd. You think this ends here? Mabel's cold voice slices through my moment of triumph, wrapping around my spine like a chill. You'll rue the day you crossed me. A palpable hush falls over us. I can almost hear our collective breath being held as her words hang in the air. My mind races, realizing that my defiance has shifted the stakes to a perilous height. She is a force of dominance, wielding more than just signatures on paperwork. I blink, absorbing the stifling weight of her threat, and the reality of what I've just challenged claws at my inside Zaya, warning gnawing at the back of my mind. All at once, the murmur of agreement begins to rise again, but I can't shake off the chill left by her ominous proclamation. I had envisioned our meeting as the turning point, the moment when we would assemble our power against her tyranny. Instead, I feel a disquiet creeping in, whispering to me that Mabel's threats aren't just bark, but real bites capable of inflicting harm. Somewhere deep down, I know I'm standing on a precarious legion misstep could send my whole resolve crumbling back into the abyss of compliance. With renewed determination, I take a step back from the edge of uncertainty and lean into the momentum we've started. We are more than just a series of rules and regulations, I declare, wanting to ignite that spark in everyone else's hearts too. As my voice projects through the hushed room, I see eyes ignite with a fire that mirrors my own. The collective sense of purpose fills the air, and I realize then that Mabel may reign as our tormentor, but we possess something she can never: stellar unity. As key discussions flow across the room, our collective grievances become a shared anthem, swelling with determination. We regroup our voices to confront Mabel not as isolated, frightened individuals, but as a unified front ready to combat her unyielding authority. It's a momentum greater than fear, a wildfire burning bright under the oppressive weight she wields over our lives. This is no longer just my fight, it's a fight for everyone who has ever shrunk under her unrelenting gaze. Even as her smirk lingers in my mind, I'm fueled by the very possibility of taking back what she has tried to seize. We must act, not only for my fence, but for the well-being of everyone shackled beneath her reign. We'll bring our voices together, each of us an ember fueling the blaze of defiance she never saw coming. Our path is about to diverge from her iron grip, and she is just an obstacle in the journey we are beginning together. Tonight, I step away from being a mere victim. I stand as a leader, rallying these incredible people beside me who have braved Mabel's stinging whip and suffered silently for too long. If this is to be a war, I will gather our strength and lead my neighbors into the next phase of our campaign, not just for my fence, but for every individual piece of our identities she attempts to smother. Together, we are formidable, and together there's no way she can break us. The dusky glow of the evening sun paints a surreal backdrop as I step back to admire my metamorphosed front yard, my castle wall rising triumphantly, a wall fortified by resolute granite and sweat-stained determination. Each massive slab I hoisted offered a sense of catharsis. I was building more than a physical structure, I was erecting barriers against oppression, reclaiming my territory piece by piece. My neighbors, initially taken aback by my audacity, are now drawn into my ambition, their faces filled with a mix of admiration and disbelief as they witness what my defiance has birthed. My fence, once a simple wooden structure, has now become a fortress that stands proud and defiant, a vibrant testament to my refusal to bow down to Mabel's demands. Every stroke of the hammer and every laborious lift of stone stirred the embers of rebellion in the hearts of my neighbors. I envisioned the praise from passers-by me makeshift stronghold, inspiring them to take back their autonomy as well. Yet that satisfaction ebbed as the shadows lengthened, and an unsettling tension began to crawl beneath my skin. While satisfaction burned in my chest, lurking in the corners of my mind was the realization that defiance could invite retaliation, especially from someone like Mabel, who wielded her authority like a sword, glimmering yet dangerous. As I stood triumphantly laying the final touches on my fortress, a cacophony of barking dogs and chirping crickets set an eerie rhythm to the night. Then, as if summoned by my growing confidence, I spotted the familiar outline of Mabel approaching my driveway, flanked by two rigid figures in dark suits, the HOA board members I had grown to despise. An unsettling concoction of dread and fury stirred within me, and I knew I had to brace myself for the upheaval this would create. They were uninvited harbingers of the very oppression I sought to escape, and I felt the familiar constriction of fear tightening around my chest as they advanced toward me with their grim faces. Suddenly, Mabel's chilling voice split the night air like a crack of thunder. "This is unacceptable. You have transformed your yard into a nuisance." With a flourish, she brandished a court order, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of authority. The words slipped out, venomous and sharp, slicing through the fabric of my victory. My heart plummeted, as the full weight of my reckless revolt washed over me. What I thought was an act of empowerment might plunge me into a legal cesspool with ramifications beyond my control. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I struggled to swallow the knot forming in my throat. "We are here to inform you that the HOA plans to sue for excessive nuisance and violation of community guidelines," she proclaimed, a triumphant smirk etched on her bitter face. The air grew thick, the sunset fading into darkness as if on cue, wrapping my surroundings in foreboding shadows that echoed the uncertainty creeping into my heart. With every word she uttered, the very walls I built to protect myself started to loom over me as symbols of impending doom. This fortress could become my shackles instead. What had I done? The onlookers from the neighborhood had dwindled to spectators. I could feel their gazes piercing me like knives. The fabric of my rebellion now felt perilously thin, as if the confidence I had draped over myself like armor was beginning to fray. I looked into the faces of the HOA members, Mabel's supporters, and my own neighbors. Each one captured in varying shades of shock and disbelief, all of them caught in the wheelhouse of my choices. I realized the truth. This wall, far from securing my safety, had made me a target for the very regime I sought to topple. "You'll regret this," Mabel hissed, her words coiling in the air, heavy with poison. A wave of panic surged through me like a cold current. I felt the walls closing in, felt the landscape shift beneath my feet. The realization that I might be placing my home and future at risk hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to unleash torrents of consequences. The thrill of rebellion I once tasted now teetered upon the abyss of anxiety and despair, flooding my system with doubt that threatened to drown my convictions. Just then, a flicker of courage ignited within me. "I won't be intimidated," I shouted, my voice steady despite the quaking fear that gripped my heart. "Today, the physical act of building won't be enough. I must fortify my mind as well." I refuse to let Mabel's spiteful grip suffocate me. My defenses will not collapse. They will transform into towering flames of resilience, illuminating the darkness into which Mabel wished to cast us all. My neighbors may be watching, but now they have the chance to stand with me, to rally against the tyranny we have endured for far too long. In their eyes, I sought to reflect the resolve that bubbled within me, the unwavering spirit that guides us all when facing insurmountable odds. Mabel may have initiated the battle, but it is not over yet. As shadows encroached, I understood that the transformation from victim to warrior required more than just stones. It demanded unity and strength, combined with the relentless will to rise against the oppressive darkness, whatever it may bring. The sun had barely risen when I stood outside the courthouse, the crisp morning air biting at my cheeks and fueling my determination. A crowd of my neighbors gathered behind me, their faces a mixture of apprehension and resolve. Today was the day we would confront Mabel and the tyranny of the HOA head-on, the day I would either reclaim my freedom or let it slip through my fingers once more. As I glanced at the towering pillars of the courthouse, I felt a sense of vertigo, a mix of excitement and fear, a tangible representation of the weight of what was at stake. Inside, the courtroom pulsed with energy, the air thick with tension as we filed in, one by one. Mabel sat at the front, her sharp features carved in an expression that could curdle milk. To her right sat the other members of the HOA board, austere and imposing, clearly enjoying the power they wielded over the homeowners they were supposedly meant to serve. I could see her lips curl into a disdainful smirk as she caught my eye, and I felt my heart start to race. Would today be the day I would finally turn the tide against her overbearing authority? As the judge entered, a deep silence cascaded through the room, leaving only the sound of rustling papers as Mabel rose to make her case. Her voice, slick and practiced, echoed off the walls as she recounted the supposed chaos I had unleashed in the neighborhood with my castle wall. "Your Honor, this structure is not only a blatant violation of our community guidelines, but a blatant affront to our sense of harmony." Her eyes sparkled with the thrill of confrontation. Her bitter rhetoric intended to sway not just the court, but the very crowd assembled. I felt the anger surging inside me, the flames of defiance igniting anew. With a nod from the judge, it was my turn to rise, and I clasped my hands together tightly to quell the tremors threatening to betray my nerves. I started by sharing the collective grievances my neighbors had endured over the years, each word laced with equal parts urgency and conviction. Behind me, I could feel their eyes bearing the weight of their support, their shared frustrations thrusting me forward. Mabel's expression shifted as I revealed photographs and documentation showcasing past complaints she had lodged against other residents, her relentless vendetta against anyone brave enough to challenge her vision of conformity. I produced the board's own records like the sword of a knight, each page a blow against the beast that had tormented our neighborhood. The judge's eyebrows shot up, disbelief grimacing across her stern face as she considered the evidence I laid before her. As final arguments drew near, I could feel the air crackling with tension, electric and heavy, as my neighbors stepped up one by one, reaffirming their support for my testimony, recounting their encounters with Mabel's overreaching dominion. The rhythmic beats of their voices formed a powerful chorus against the smothering silence of complacency, and I realized I was no longer alone in this fight. When Mabel rose again, her voice rang out like a hollow bell, desperate and shrill, attempting to retain the reins of power she had grown so accustomed to wielding. "This wall is a threat to the very fabric of our community. It needs to come down." Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fury and disbelief, one hand bracing against the desk in front of her, as if it were her only anchor to reality. But as our perspective filled the room, I could see the inevitability dawning in the judge's gaze, the slow disillusionment settling like dust over Mabel's reign of intimidation. Finally, when the gavel fell, the sound rang out like a gunshot cutting through the fog. "The court finds the actions of the HOA excessive," the judge announced, her voice firm and unwavering. I could hardly breathe as my neighbors erupted around me, their cheers reverberating off the courtroom walls. Relief flooded me, sweeping over me like a tidal wave, washing away the months of anxiety and fear created by Mabel's iron grip. As I exited the courthouse, my heart swelled with relief, mingled with the joy of triumph. The cool breeze welcomed me like an old friend, and as I turned to face my neighbors, their faces beamed with victorious energy. Mabel was dwindling in the distance, her figure now less imposing, the earthy weight of her entitled scorn retreating with her. My castle wall stood proud behind me, no longer just a structure but a beacon of hope, a fortress of defiance that would become a symbol for every neighbor who had finally committed to rising against Mabel's misuse of power. Together, we were not just defenders of our homes, but champions of our collective Fatea tapestry of resilience woven in unity against the oppressive threads of fear.